Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we extract the crucial insights from the latest in AI research.
Great to be here.
Today, we're diving into a really interesting challenge in the world of large vision language models, or LVLMs. It's this tendency they sometimes have to, overthink. Overthink.
Yeah, where they generate these incredibly lengthy reasoning steps, even for what seem like pretty simple questions.
Right, and that's not just inefficient from a compute perspective, it can actually mess with the accuracy sometimes.
Exactly. It's this tricky balance, isn't it? Getting models to be powerful thinkers, but also, efficient when the task doesn't need all that heavy lifting.
Precisely. And the paper we're looking at today tackles this head-on. It's got a really neat approach.
Okay, let's name it. The paper is Fast, Slow Thinking for Large Vision Language Model Reasoning. So for everyone listening, especially if you need the quick version for, say, a short clip.
Get the key takeaway fast. Yeah, here's the core idea. They introduce a framework called FAST. Stands for Fast, Slow Thinking. And what it does is pretty smart. It lets the LVLM dynamically adjust how deep its reasoning goes based on the question itself.
So it's not just always thinking slow or always thinking fast. It adapts.
Exactly, like using the right amount of brain power for the job. And the results they show are pretty impressive state-of-the-art accuracy on some tough reasoning benchmarks.
While using way fewer tokens, right?
Yeah.
Compared to those models that just always go deep.
Yeah, significantly fewer tokens. So it's achieving this much better balance between thinking deeply when needed and being quick when possible. That's our mission today. Unpack how FAST works, look at the proof, and figure out what this means for LVLMs going forward.
Right. We want you to really understand how they're tackling this overthinking thing and managing that trade-off between reasoning length and getting the right answer. Super important if you're actually building or using these models.
Okay, let's dig into this overthinking problem a bit more. The paper gives a good example with the geometry 3K dataset.
Yeah, that's a good one. They point to models like R11 Vision, these sort of slow thinking types.
And they were just churning out these super long responses. Wasn't that it? Like, even for basic geometry problems.
Totally. Like way longer than necessary. Almost double the length of the base model's output in some cases. Just lots of steps.
And the kicker is, it wasn't just wasting time or tokens.
No, that's the crucial part. For the easier questions in that geometry set, all that extra reasoning actually dropped the accuracy. It went from about 72.7% for the base model down to 69.5%.
Wow. So more thinking actually led to more mistakes.
Yeah, it's like, creating more chances to slip up, overcomplicating things, like trying to solve 2 + 2 using differential equations. Maybe you get there, maybe you don't, but It's definitely not the efficient path.
Right. Diminishing returns hitting hard there. Okay, so that's the issue with always thinking slow. What about the fast thinking models? What's their limitation?
Well, fast models are great for speed, obviously, but they often just don't have the capacity or the structure to do that really complex multi-step reasoning you need for harder visual tasks.
So they struggle with the tough stuff.
Exactly. The paper really frames the challenge as finding a way to bridge that gap. You want a model that can be quick and simple, but also deep and complex, and crucially knows when to be which.
Makes sense. Now, people have tried to fix overthinking in regular LLMs, right? Like text-only models. Things like rewarding shorter answers in training or just telling the model, be brief in the prompt.
Yeah, those approaches exist.
But the paper says they don't really work well, or at least not directly, for LVLMs. Why is that? What's different?
It's the vision part. That's the key difference. LVLMs have to ground everything in the image. They're processing visual information alongside the text.
Okay.
So the complexity isn't just in the question's text, it's often embedded in the visual details. If you just slap a hard link limit on the reasoning, you might force the model to ignore important visual evidence it needs to actually figure out the answer. The reasoning has to account for the image, too.
Gotcha. Can't just treat it like a text problem. Which brings us neatly to FAST. So tell us about the core ideas behind this framework. What's the big picture?
So the main goal of FAST is to get this dynamic balance between, fast and slow thinking. And it does this mainly through 2 things. First, adaptive rewards during training.
Rewards that change based on the question.
Exactly, based on the question's characteristics. And second, a pretty clever way of managing the training data itself, sort of teaching the model both modes.
And didn't they do some initial investigation just looking at how reasoning length and accuracy are related in LVLMs?
They did, yeah. And one really interesting finding was that, you can use reward shaping to make the model produce longer or shorter answers. That works. But there wasn't always a clear, direct link between that forced length and whether the model got the answer right. Sometimes longer was better, sometimes shorter, sometimes it didn't matter much for accuracy.
Ah, so it's not a simple longer is always better for hard problems or shorter is always better for easy ones kind of thing.
Not necessarily, no. It's more nuanced. And that variability, that lack of a super strong correlation, actually suggested there was room for a more adaptive approach like FAST. You can kind of nudge the length without automatically tanking the accuracy if you do it smartly.
Okay, that makes sense. So FAST is the framework, and the specific algorithm they developed is FAST-GRPO. GRPO being Group Relative Policy Optimization.
Right, a variant of it.
Let's break down FAST-GRPO. The paper mentions 3 key components. First up, model-based metrics for question characterization. What's going on there?
This is where it starts getting really clever. Instead of just applying the same logic to every question, FAST tries to figure out, from the model's perspective, how hard is this specific question for me right now?
Okay, like a self-assessment.
Kind of, yeah. They use 2 main metrics: difficulty and complexity.
Difficulty sounds straightforward enough. How do they measure it?
They define it as S difficulty, and it's basically 1 minus the pass at K rate. So they let the model try to answer the question K times, generating different reasoning paths.
Right.
If the model gets the right answer in at least one of those K tries, that counts as a pass. The less often it passes over those K tries, the higher the difficulty score.
And it's specific to the model's current state.
Exactly. That's crucial. It's model-centric. A question might be hard early in training, but easy later on. The difficulty metric reflects that ongoing learning.
Okay, that's neat. What about complexity? S complexity. How is that different?
Complexity tries to capture the inherent challenge, considering both that model-centric difficulty and how intricate the image itself is.
Ah, bringing the visual aspect back in.
Right. They define S complexity as the difficulty, S difficulty, multiplied by the image complexity, each EMG. So a question can be complex because the model finds it hard, or because the image is really busy or detailed, or both.
How do they quantify that image complexity, HMG? That seems tricky.
They look at 2 things: texture and semantics. For texture, they use something called GLCM entropy, gray level co-occurrence matrix. High entropy means lots of fine-grained texture detail.
Okay.
For semantics, they look at the entropy of the features from the last layer of a pre-trained vision transformer, a VIT. High entropy there suggests a wider variety of objects or concepts in the image. They combine these to get HMG.
So high HMG means either very detailed textures or lots of different visual things going on.
Pretty much. So S complexity goes up if the model struggles and the image itself is visually rich or challenging.
Got it. So that's how they characterize the question. What's the second component of FAST-GRPO, the adaptive thinking reward mechanism?
Okay, so now they use those difficulty and complexity scores to shape the reward the model gets during reinforcement learning. The total reward is made up of 3 parts.
3 parts.
Yeah. First, accuracy reward. Simple. Did you get the final answer right? Yes or no? Second, a format reward. RF. Basically, did you use the think and answer tags correctly? Just encourages good structure.
Standard stuff so far. What's the third crucial part?
The thinking reward seed. This is the adaptive bit that encourages fast or slow thinking.
Ah, okay. How does that work? How does it use complexity?
All right, so they set a threshold for complexity. They use the 80th percentile of complexity within the current batch of training data.
Okay, a relative threshold.
Yeah. Now, if a question's complexity, S complexity, is below that threshold, meaning it's relatively less complex for this batch.
An easier one.
Right. And if the model gets the answer correct, it gets a positive thinking reward for being concise. The reward is actually higher the shorter its reasoning is compared to the average length, LEG, in that batch.
So it's directly rewarding efficiency on easier, correct answers.
Exactly. Be quick and correct when you can.
Makes sense. What about the more complex questions above the threshold?
For those complex questions, if the model gets the answer wrong, it gets a thinking reward that encourages more thinking. The reward increases as the reasoning length gets closer to that batch average length, LEG.
So it's incentivizing more effort when struggling with hard problems?
Precisely. Try harder. Explore more steps. But interestingly, if the model gets a complex question correct, the thinking reward is 0.
Oh, why is that?
The main goal for the thinking reward on complex tasks is really to push the model to explore more when it's failing. If it's already succeeding, the accuracy reward covers that, and they don't want to overly complicate things by also rewarding length in that scenario.
Huh. Okay, that's quite a specific design. And they mentioned the scaling factors for the format and thinking rewards, left and what?
Yeah, they set both to 0.5, giving them, decent weight compared to the main accuracy reward.
All right, that's a very clever reward structure. What's the third piece? Difficulty-aware KL divergence? Sounds technical again.
It is a bit, yeah. So KL divergence in RL is often used to keep the model's policy its strategy for choosing actions, or in this case, generating reasoning steps from changing too wildly between updates. It's like a stability control.
Okay, keeps it from going off the rails during training.
Exactly. Now, FAST makes the strength of this stability control, which is governed by a coefficient beta, dependent on the difficulty of the question, S difficulty.
So the stability control changes based on how hard the question is.
Yep. For harder questions, high S difficulty, they use a lower beta value, closer to a minimum. Baminizi B equals 0.001. For easier questions, low S difficulty, they use a higher beta value, closer to a maximum, max 6.03.
What's the intuition there? Lower beta for hard questions.
Lower beta means a weaker KL constraint. It allows the model's policy to change more. So for hard questions where the model is struggling, you want to let it explore more freely, try out significantly different reasoning approaches. Less stability, more exploration.
Okay, that makes sense. Let it experiment when it's stuck. And higher beta for easy questions.
Higher beta means a stronger constraint, keeping the policy closer to what it was before. If the model's already doing well on an easy question, you don't want it to drastically change its successful strategy. You want more stability, less unnecessary deviation.
Keep doing what works for the easy stuff.
Pretty much. They show this decomposed gradient coefficient, GC-AF test, which sort of visualizes how this adaptive KL part and the main reward signal contribute differently depending on the difficulty.
Very cool. Okay, beyond the algorithm itself, they also talked about data. They did some series filtering, starting with like 500,000 questions.
Yeah, they were quite rigorous about the data. Started with a big pool from sources like LavaCode, Mulberry, MathV, 360K.
Yeah.
The stage 1 filtering, focus on getting verifiable, closed form answers, multiple choice, single word, that kind of thing. That cut it down significantly.
To about 180K.
Around there, yeah. Then stage 2, difficulty calibration. They actually removed questions the model found too easy to too hard based on that S difficulty metric.
Why remove those?
They argued that those extremes didn't provide a strong enough signal for the GRPO training. The model either always got them right or always got them wrong, so there wasn't much gradient information for learning the policy.
Ah, focusing on the learnable zone.
Kind of, yeah. So after all that filtering, they ended up with a core set of about 18,000 high-quality questions. And figure 5 in the paper shows the mix quite a bit of math, but also figure understanding, science, general visual QA.
And then on top of the filtering, they use this special sampling strategy during training. Slow to fast. What's that about?
This is based on their observation that harder questions often need longer reasoning, so it's a kind of curriculum learning. In the early training epochs, they deliberately excluded the easiest samples from the batches.
Forcing it to focus on the hard stuff first.
Exactly. Push the model to develop that capacity for deeper, more complex reasoning, the slow thinking, right at the start.
Okay, then later.
Later in training, they flipped it. They started excluding the hardest samples and focused more on the medium and easier ones. The idea is, now that the model hopefully has the capacity for slow thinking, you encourage it to apply that knowledge more efficiently and learn the fast thinking for problems it can now handle more easily.
Guiding it from complex to efficient.
Right. And it's neat because it doesn't add extra computation. They're already calculating difficulty anyway. It's just about how they construct the training batches over time.
Okay, so that's the whole setup. The metrics, the adaptive reward, the adaptive KL, the data filtering, the slow to fast sampling. Sounds really thorough. Did it actually work? What did the results show?
The results look pretty strong, honestly. They tested FAST, both 3B and 7B parameter versions, on a bunch of standard reasoning benchmarks, MathVista, MathVerse, others.
And the accuracy?
State of the art, according to their tables. They even show it outperforming some powerful closed models like GPT-4o on some of these tasks, which is, quite a claim. That's in table 3.
Wow, beating GPT-4o, that's definitely noteworthy. But FAST is all about balancing accuracy and efficiency. How did it do on the length side?
That's where it really shines, I think. Compared to the baseline slow thinking methods, they saw huge reductions in average reasoning length. We're talking like 33% to over 67% fewer tokens generated, depending on the model and benchmark.
Huge savings. And that was while getting state-of-the-art accuracy?
Yeah, that's the key, maintaining or even sometimes improving accuracy while drastically cutting down the reasoning length. They also compared it directly to other methods specifically designed to shorten reasoning. Kimi, Gosfin, dazed, and found FAST generally struck a better balance, not sacrificing as much accuracy for the length reduction.
Okay, that's compelling. Did they do ablation studies to see which parts were most important?
They did. Table 6 shows that. Removing the data selection really hurt accuracy, showing that curated data was vital.
Makes sense. Garbage in, garbage out.
Right. Taking out the thinking reward didn't hurt accuracy much, but the reasoning length shot back up, proving it's key for controlling the fast-slow dynamic.
So the thinking reward is doing its job.
Yep. And removing the difficulty-aware KL regularization also caused a noticeable accuracy drop, suggesting that adaptive stability control really helps the learning process.
So each piece seems to be contributing. What about that slow to fast sampling? Did they compare it to other ways of sampling?
Table 7 covers that. They tried fast to slow and also just dynamically filtering extremes throughout training. Slow to fast consistently gave the best combo of high accuracy and short reasoning length. Fast to slow was okay on accuracy, but didn't shorten the reasoning nearly as much.
So the curriculum order matters?
Seems like it, yeah.
And how does this whole reinforcement learning approach compare to just, supervised fine-tuning SFT on good reasoning examples?
Good question. Table 8 addresses that. They compared FAST trained on their 18K samples to SFT models trained on much larger data sets, some generated by GPT-4o or another model called DeepSeek R1. FAST generally outperformed the SFT models, even with way less training data. They noted that SFT, especially using the DeepSeek data, sometimes resulted in its own kind of overthinking or repetitive answers, which FAST avoids with its adaptive rewards.
Interesting. So the RL approach seems more effective here. Did they play around with the hyperparameters much, like that 80th percentile complexity threshold or the KL beta values?
Oh yeah, they have tables digging into that too, 9, 10, and 11. They basically show why they chose the values they did.
Any key takeaways from those?
Well, the difficulty split analysis supported their dynamic sampling. No single difficulty range was best for everything. The KL analysis confirmed that making beta dependent on difficulty was better than a fixed value. And the complexity threshold test showed that 80% was a good sweet spot. Lower thresholds made reasoning too short sometimes, hurting accuracy, while higher ones didn't encourage enough conciseness.
So the choices seem well justified by data. Finally, did they show any actual examples, like side-by-side comparisons?
Yes, Figure 4 has some great case studies. They show a simple coordinate task where FAST gives a correct answer in just 59 tokens, while R11 Evision takes like 349 tokens for the same thing.
Wow, big difference.
Then there's a harder geometry problem. The base model gets it wrong. R11 Vision gets it right, but uses a massive 676 tokens. FAST also gets it right, but in a much more reasonable 375 tokens.
So it's being concise on the easy one and appropriately detailed, but still efficient on the hard one.
Exactly. It really visually demonstrates that adaptive behavior they were aiming for.
Okay, so summing it all up, FAST seems like a really solid step towards solving this overthinking issue in LVLMs. It dynamically adjusts reasoning, gets great accuracy, and significantly cuts down on the computational cost, the token usage.
That's the gist of it, yeah. It's a really promising technique for making these big vision language models more practical and efficient without sacrificing their reasoning power.
Which has got to be huge for anyone trying to deploy these things, right? Especially if you don't have unlimited GPU resources or need faster responses.
Absolutely. Making them more efficient and scalable is critical for real-world use cases.
Yeah.
This kind of adaptive reasoning is a really important direction.
It really gets you thinking, doesn't it? If they can dynamically control reasoning length based on model perceived difficulty and complexity, what else could be adapted on the fly?
Good question.
Could you adapt, I don't know, the level of detail in internal representations? Or maybe apply similar fast, slow ideas to planning in robotics, where you need both quick reactions and sometimes deeper deliberation?
That's a fascinating thought. Or even in other complex AI systems making decisions under uncertainty. This idea of adaptive internal processing feels like it could have much broader applications.
So maybe a provocative thought for you listening, especially our technical audience. Building on this, how else could we make models adapt their internal workings? Beyond just reasoning length, what other characteristics could be dynamically tuned based on the input, based on the model's own confidence or state to boost performance or efficiency?
Yeah, what's the next step in adaptive AI? It's definitely fertile ground for research.
Yeah.
Thinking about how models can learn to manage their own computational resources more intelligently.
Absolutely. Well, if this has piqued your interest, definitely check out the full paper. Link will be in the description. Dive into the details, mull over the implications. Maybe it sparks an idea for your own work.
It's a good read, worth your time if you're in this space.
For sure. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into FAST.
My pleasure.
We'll catch you next time with more insights from the cutting edge of AI research.